Hello everybody and welcome to Charts with Dan. Today we are talking about not only the weekend box office, but some huge news that broke just today, a seismic shift in the power structure of one of the biggest studios in Hollywood that affects not just movies, but TV, streaming, you name it. We're going to break it all down. But before we talk about that, let's look at the box office top 5. And as expected, Spiral from the Book of Saw did open at number 1. There were some expectations or some estimates that had thought that it might come in closer to the $12 to $15 million range. So some people have the movie opening a bit soft. Some people have it opening right, maybe at or slightly below other expectations. But the point really is that it did not set the box office on fire. There did not look like to be a huge amount of audience demand for the movie this weekend. There could be any number of reasons for it. One of those is that the movie was advertising itself as a radical new look from the Book of Saw, something new for fans of the franchise and maybe something new for people that were not fans of the franchise. I think maybe the word got out that there really wasn't that much different about the movie, at least not in my opinion. If you want to check out my review, you can click the little card up in the corner of the screen. I just don't know if there was a whole lot there to reinvigorate the Saw audience. This was by far the lowest grossing opening weekend for any film in the Saw franchise by almost half of the movie above it. Part of it is also probably that some people are either not ready to go back to the movies, they are out of the habit of going to the movies, or they saw this movie and said, well, this isn't the one that's going to take me back. We have more and more theaters opening. Capacity limits are loosening here in the United States. However, Canada still has a huge number of theaters closed, and that goes into the North American gross as well. So for whatever reason, not a lot of people flocking to the movie theater to see Saw this past weekend. Looking at the other films in the top 5, we have Wrath of Man in its second week in the second spot at $3.7 million. At number 3 is Those Who Wish Me Dead, starring Angelina Jolie at $2.8 million. Another soft opening a little bit below what some people had expected it to, especially when you look at the prestige. You have Taylor Sheridan involved. There's a lot of buzz that you would think might be behind this, but this is also another one of those movies that's one of those day and date deals with Warner Brothers. So it was premiering in theaters at the same time that it was playing for people at home on HBO Max. And when we look at the data that's available so far, one pattern that's emerging when you look at movies that skew a little bit more adult, that skew a little older, things like The Little Things, things like Judas and the Black Messiah, and now Those Who Wish Me Dead, is that it seems like the older audiences for those movies are much more apt to either skip them or watch them at home. Now, we'll never know really how many people are watching them at home. HBO Max knows, and they're not going to release those numbers. But the fact of the matter remains is that the box office has been soft for all of these movies, and that's something to take into account. We're going to talk about Warner Brothers because that's the big news that broke today. But one thing that we do know is that they appear to be moving away from this day and date strategy that was announced for all of 2021, and they may very well be moving away from the person who set this whole policy in place to begin with. So a lot of data that I'm sure the people over at HBO Max and at WarnerMedia are crunching, in addition to all the other crazy things that are going on there today. But one little interesting piece of perhaps wisdom to take away from this is that the more adult skewing the title, the less you seem to be seeing people going out to the box office. And then movies like Mortal Kombat, at least the opening weekend, and Godzilla vs. Kong, it does seem like there's a healthy chunk of the audience that is still going to turn out to the theaters and see those movies. Breaking down the rest of the top 5, Demon Slayer the movie in its 4th week is at number 4. It has outlasted Mortal Kombat, the movie that it came in second place to when they both opened on the same weekend. So it's had some box office staying power. And then at number 5, speaking of box office staying power, Raya and the Last Dragon in its 11th week, still hanging around the box office top 5. We talked about it on the show. When it opened, it seemed like a soft opening. Tom and Jerry came along and had a much splashier opening, and yet it is Raya and the Last Dragon that has stuck around longer, and that's why, you know, the first chapter is an important chapter to be written about when we talk about the box office, but it's not the only chapter. Legs and how a movie performs over time, also very important things, and Raya and the Last Dragon now is now barely edging out Tom and Jerry at the domestic box office. Now, pieces of the puzzle we don't know include the fact that we don't know how much revenue it generated because it was available day and date on Disney Plus as a purchase. It's now available to purchase elsewhere. So we don't quite know the full economics of Raya and the Last Dragon, but even though it came in what seemed to be a little bit behind Tom and Jerry initially, it has now had that staying power for people to continue to visit theaters if they choose to watch the movie that way. Looking at the top per theater average, Spiral from the Book Book of Saw. There were no other limited release films that really did spectacular business. So Spiral is also the number one at $3,100 in over 2,800 theaters. That's not a spectacular number, but it's a number nonetheless. And looking at the summer box office, because we are technically in the summer movie season, Wrath of Man stays the number one film of the summer at $14.5 million, followed by Spiral from the Book of Saw in second place with $8.7 million. Then Those Who Wish Me Dead in third at $2.8 million. Here Today, which made the list last week, is at number 4. Finding You and Profile are at numbers 5 and 6 because they opened up in over 1,000 theaters, which is my minimum requirement for making this list. I also saw Profile this past weekend, and I can safely say that it is a movie. Let's look back at the last 365 days, so 1 year from this date last year to this date today, and the number one film is still Godzilla vs. Kong at $95 million. But who had The Croods: A New Age bypassing the theatrical gross of Tenet on their 2020 bingo card at the beginning of last year? Because if you had that, then I need to start taking some stock tips from you. The Croods, after a very long and slow crawl through the box office charts, has passed Tenet and is now the second highest grossing film domestically of 2020, or I should say of the last 365 days. These will rotate out as we progress through the year. Tenet now at number 3, followed by Wonder Woman 1984. Raya and the Last Dragon has bypassed Tom and Jerry and is now the 5th highest grossing film of the last year, followed very closely by Tom and Jerry, then Demon Slayer the movie, Mortal Kombat, Nobody, and The New Mutants at number 10. So let's see how we stand for 2021, at least this year, movies that have opened on January 1st or after. And the number one film of the year is Godzilla vs. Kong. Raya and the Last Dragon rises to the number 2 spot at $46.1 million. It has now edged out Tom and Jerry, which is at $45.2 million. But Demon Slayer the movie is sniffing right there behind both of them at number 4. Mortal Kombat at number 5 with $39.9 million. Then we have Nobody, followed by The Marksman, The Little Things, The Unholy, and knocking Chaos Walking out of the 2021 top 10. We have Wrath of Man in its second weekend. It has done enough to knock the Lionsgate YA disaster out of the top 10 and probably out of a lot of people's memories. Pretty crazy when you think about something with the star power of Daisy Ridley and Tom Holland having a very unremarkable box office run. One of those misfires that some people are going to remember, but probably most memorable for the potential that it had that it just wasn't able to realize. And finally, let's look at the 2021 worldwide box office. And number one, really the entrenched number 1 and 2 right now are Hi Mom and Detective Chinatown 3. They remain at the top, followed by Godzilla vs. Kong, then a huge gulf. Then we have A Writer's Odyssey at number 4. Cliffwalkers has made a big jump from number 8 to number 5, so it jumps up 3 spots. Sister drops down 1. And then we've had 2 Chinese films that have been added, and that's because, I try to get the box office numbers when they come in, but the numbers don't always come in a timely manner. Impasse at number 7 and My Love at number 9. They split Endgame, which is now down 2 spots to number 8, and then Tom and Jerry's bumped down 3 all the way down to number 10. That knocks out Raya and the Last Dragon and Boonie Bears the Wildlife, which is another Chinese film, from the top 10. So worldwide, at least as of this reporting, Tom and Jerry has outgrossed Raya and the Last Dragon, although it's very close and we could see those two flip-flop, but 2 more Chinese films added to the list. That now makes 8 films out of the top 10 from the Chinese market. 2 are American productions. Let's move on now to the story that set Hollywood and really anyone who follows the media business abuzz this morning. This is very strange. Usually you see these kinds of things coming from weeks away. This is a major, major move that was done in almost absolute secrecy. It wasn't even rumored until I think 48 hours ago or less, and that is WarnerMedia, which just 3 years ago was officially brought under the umbrella of AT&T. It was a blockbuster merger. It went through a Department of Justice review. It was supposed to set the new standard for combining distribution and production and streaming, the whole new marketplace. Well, now AT&T is cutting WarnerMedia loose. WarnerMedia will now merge with Discovery, and those 2 companies will spin off to become their own publicly traded company. They will be independent of AT&T, and AT&T is basically saying, we don't want any part of the media business anymore. We don't want to make it. We want to focus on telecommunications. We are a telecom company. This is what we're going to do, and this other stuff, which they acquired at great expense. It was very Jurassic Park-like. Spare no expense is now going to be be divested from their company. So we're going to talk about a little bit about what that means and why this happened, because this was such a major move. Why, after only 3 years, would a company like AT&T move now to get rid of the assets that they bought for such a high price? Let's get to the particulars of the deal, which is that AT&T is going to receive about $43 billion in different cash, stock, etc. Business deals are very complicated, but about $43 billion in exchange for giving up WarnerMedia and merging it with Discovery. That's going to help pay down something that AT&T has been struggling with, largely because they've done a lot of mergers and acquisitions in the last 5 to 10 years, and that is debt. The company is saddled with over $150 billion in debt, and it's been hanging around the neck of that company like a lead weight. When you look at investors, when you look at this at a stock price, when a company has that much debt and they're not really paying that debt down, that is a big red flag to a lot of people. It can hinder the growth of your company. And it looked like AT&T was ready to get rid of some of the things that were causing that debt and also pay some of that debt down. This deal will help them do that. And when we're breaking down why that is, you have to realize that when AT&T made all of these acquisitions, when they acquired not just WarnerMedia and all of those assets, but they also bought DirecTV in 2015. They acquired all the problems of a media business and a telecommunications business, and that's a lot of problems. AT&T bought DirecTV back in 2015 for about $48 billion, and they are spinning that business, they announced in February, into its own company along with AT&T U-verse and AT&T TV, and that company's worth is about $16 billion. So that's a big drop in value, acquiring something for 48, spinning it off into its own company, which is worth 16. And a big reason why is that AT&T had hoped that owning DirecTV would give it a distribution conduit for all of these different things that they were producing. But DirecTV has been hit hard by people who are cutting the cord. A lot of people saying, I don't want to pay for satellite television anymore. I'm getting everything through my streaming services. It's an outdated way of doing things. It's too expensive. For whatever reason, there have been a lot of cancellations with DirecTV. What does that do? Well, first of all, your profits for that part of your business drop. But the other thing that I was reading is that HBO Max, when you're gaining a streaming subscriber, it's about $15 a month that they're paying. When you lose a DirecTV subscriber, they're paying about $65 a month. So for AT&T, when you have churn like that, for every one DirecTV subscriber that cancels their membership, you have to get back 3 or 4 or 5 people to sign up, new signups for HBO Max to offset those losses. And so the losses incurred by DirecTV were adding to the debt burden of the company. It was just an albatross around their neck. So they had already moved to get rid of DirecTV earlier this year. That is in the process of happening. The important thing to note about this merger with Discovery is that much like when AT&T acquired, at that time, Time Warner and now WarnerMedia, it's going to take a while to get this deal done. It's a very complex deal. It's actually going to close, they project, sometime next year. So it's not like they are merged, they are one company. WarnerMedia is still a division of AT&T. They will remain a division of AT&T for probably a year or so. And this is also pending approval or making sure that the deal doesn't go south. But there were other suitors that were rumored to have been in the market to buy WarnerMedia, including NBC Universal, which includes Comcast, which includes so much. If you can imagine the mega company that that would create. So if this deal were to fall through, it's not like AT&T would just throw their hands up and say like, well, I guess we're stuck with WarnerMedia now. It's very obvious that they are engaged and invested in getting rid of their media assets. So what is this new company going to look like? What does the combination of Discovery and WarnerMedia produce? Well, first of all, you're going to have both of their premium streaming services, which are Discovery Plus and HBO Max. Those are both fairly recently launched. There's no word on if those are going to combine into one service, if it's going to be like Disney, who can combine Disney Plus and ESPN and Hulu into a package deal. But you also get all of the assets of WarnerMedia. That's the studio, Warner Brothers, HBO, CNN, the Turner assets. You get everything that Discovery has too. So that's Food Network, HGTV, TLC, a lot of 90 Day Fiancé stuff going on. Discovery, Animal Planet, a lot of home shows, a lot of reality shows. Those will now all be under the same umbrella, under the same company, and they are looking to create a content pipeline because their stated goal is that they want to create a streaming presence with HBO Max and Discovery Plus, either together or separately, that will compete with the big boys. And that is another major reason why AT&T wanted to get out of this business, because it became very obvious with the escalation of the streaming wars, with the success of Disney Plus, with the amount of money that Netflix is putting into their programming, with the amount of money that Amazon is putting into their programming across the board, that in order to compete in this marketplace, they are going to have to pump tens of billions of dollars into programming. AT&T obviously did not want to do that. That's another reason why they're going to have their own company. So now this is going to be a company with WarnerMedia and Discovery Plus that is going to be their own company. The purse strings will be cut between AT&T. They're not going to have, as John Oliver says, business daddy lining their pockets full of cash anymore. But at the same time, they plan to invest heavily, at least reportedly $20 billion into content right away to get going. The goals that I was reading is that they want to increase their subscriber base tenfold. Now, this is all big talk. One big change that already seems to be underway is a change at the top, and it is with Jason Kilar. And if you don't know this name, we've mentioned it on the show a couple of times. He is the current CEO of WarnerMedia. He's only been on the job for about a year, but it was announced that the CEO of Discovery, David Kaslov, will be in charge of the new company. That got a lot of people wondering what's going to go on with Jason Kilar. The New York Times reported today that he has apparently hired a legal team to negotiate his exit from WarnerMedia. So it looks like he will be losing his position at the top of the food chain and essentially will be displaced by this change in corporate ownership, this change in organization. There are any number of questions as to why he's being replaced, why he's not being reassigned or brought on. Perhaps he just doesn't want to take any role other than CEO. He would see it as a step down. But you also have to wonder, and this is pure speculation on my part, Jason Kilar is also reportedly the person who settled on the day and date strategy for Warner Brothers this year, for releasing things onto the streaming service HBO Max and into theaters the same day as a strategic way to push subscribers to HBO Max. This caused an uproar amongst a lot of their creatives. They didn't feel like they'd been consulted. They felt betrayed. This was something that was probably very difficult for the company to handle. And now you have, just a few months after this move was made, that the CEO who made that decision being ousted from that position, and it looks like not even going to stay with the company. Did that have something to do with why? I don't know. Where there's smoke, there's fire. There's got to be some reason, whether that's on Jason Kilar's part or whether that's on the part of the new ownership coming up, that he just doesn't have a role in this company. The media space is extremely volatile. Nobody really knows what the future holds. Everyone can project and try to put on their best face and say they know what the future is going to be. But coming from somebody who used to work for a company that literally disappeared overnight, and thank goodness we were in better hands by the time that happened, it's all wine and roses until it's not. You have the winning strategy until you don't. And things are always great until you close. And so I'm sure that this was a shock for a lot of people. It was reportedly a shock for Jason Kilar, who was kept out of this process. And think about that. He is the CEO of the company that's going to be spun off into its own company and merged with Discovery, and yet he was not let in on these talks. These were apparently done by the CEO of Discovery and John Stankey, the CEO of AT&T. That says something about their faith in him or where they thought his role was going to be, because you don't want to be surprised by this kind of thing, and apparently this was something that Jason Kilar was not made aware of until days ago. So this is the big splash, and the next year is going to be a slow motion crawl to this deal closing or not. There's always the chance that it won't close. This will be done in 2022, but the discussion turned quickly, as it does for just about any situation on the internet, to the Snyderverse. Because Zack Snyder, after the release of Zack Snyder's Justice League, the social media campaign has persisted, now that the Snyder Cut has been released, to restore the Snyderverse, to bring Zack Snyder back, to continue his vision for the DC superheroes. And I already have seen online and on social media, etc., several articles that are saying, like, this means that there's hope for the Snyderverse. This could mean the Snyderverse isn't dead just yet. And I've read several of those articles, and I would add that if you are excited for this and you see just the headlines and you don't read those articles, there's a very big but attached to that. And I don't mean your keister. I mean that there's a very big condition attached to this statement, which is that when people say that this opens the door potentially for the Snyderverse to come back or for the Snyderverse to be restored, essentially what they're saying, what these articles are actually saying, if you read them, is that there's always or there's often regime change when something like this happens. And there is the possibility, really, of two things happening. One of those is the possibility that David Hasselhoff, who is the CEO of Discovery, could be a big Zack Snyder fan and could go to the executives currently at Warner Brothers, who will have a new home in this new company, the existing executives at Warner Brothers, who have shown no compunction to restore the Snyderverse, and say, I, as your CEO, am giving you a directive to bring back Zack Snyder because I think it's going to make us money, or I want to put these movies out on a streaming service, or whatever. The other thing that a lot of people are kind of staking their hopes on is that in this change of management and in spinning WarnerMedia and Discovery into their own company, that the board, the executives at Warner Brothers, the studio, will be replaced. And that the new executives that are brought in will be much more amenable to working with Zack Snyder. The insider reports, and I hesitate to even quote them because they're often wrong, but there have been several reports that the existing structure at Warner Brothers is not particularly excited about the idea of reviving the Zack Snyder universe, and that they weren't particularly impressed with it to begin with, which is why what happened to a large degree. So the other hope is that from a lot of people that are saying, like, this could restore the Snyderverse, is that you completely replace the executive structure and bring in new executives who would say, yes, we're going to do that. I'm not saying that's not going to happen. It very well could happen. But I would just say, don't jump in immediately. And I've already seen people are already on social media. I remember when the AT&T talks started back in 2016 going into 2017, people flooded social media with release the Snyder Cut, trying to get the new owners to do it. And I've seen now that people are flooding the Discovery social medias to get them to restore the Snyderverse. And it's very possible that somebody may step in and do that. But the important thing to remember is that unless there is a change made at the Warner Brothers level between now and the time that this deal closes in 2022, then there's not going to be any step in from the new regime to have it done until this deal is closed, because they're not going to really have the authority to tell Warner Brothers what to do until then. I've said before, I'm never going to say never ever again when it comes to anything regarding Zack Snyder or his vision of the DC superheroes or the Justice League, etc. Anything is possible. But the one thing that I would say, that if you think that this opens the door, it may very well do that, but you need to wait a little while for that door to open. Because right now, all signs point to the fact that if it's going to happen, it's going to be when this changeover happens, and that's not going to be until 2022. Now that I've said that, what's going to happen is that next week, they're going to announce that Zack Snyder's coming back and making 6 more movies, because that's just how it happens on the show. And that's why I'm saying never say never, and leaving the door open for the fact that there could be a change of heart. I don't personally think that there will be, but there could be. So slow and steady wins the race. Let's see what happens with WarnerMedia and Discovery. But a lot of very interesting things. And really, to me, the most interesting thing being that AT&T, who thought they had a great vision of the future just 3 years ago, how quickly they got out of the media space. I think that is really a testament to just how expensive it is to launch one of these ventures, that you have a telecommunications company like AT&T that says, listen, we've got enough on our plate with, launching 5G and getting all of the broadband and all of the spectrum and everything that we need in order to do that. We're getting out of this business altogether. That just goes to show you just how competitive the media business is right now. It requires an investment to play on the global scale, on the scale of a Netflix, of tens of billions, maybe over the lifetime, hundreds of billions of dollars. Things are escalating quickly, and the stakes are getting higher and higher, and this is just the latest example of just how crazy this landscape is right now. Let's move from the future of entertainment to the past and look at our box office flashback. And we're going back 20 years to this weekend at the box office back in 2001. And that's when we were introduced to the lovable Shrek. Shrek opened to $42 million. That's in 2001 money. That's a pretty impressive opening. On May 18th through 20th, 2001, that was followed by the third week of The Mummy Returns, which is also a massive hit back in that summer, of $20.4 million. Heath Ledger in A Knight's Tale in its second week was at number 3 at $10.4 million. Then opening in fourth place was the Jennifer Lopez film with one of the worst posters I've ever seen, Angel Eyes, with $9.2 million. And at number 5 in its sixth week, Bridget Jones's Diary at $3.7 million. That would eventually net Renee Zellweger an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. And we will wrap up the show as we always do by looking at the streaming charts, what people are watching on various streaming services and devices. And we're going to start with Amazon. just a little bit of changeover here. Nobody is at number 1 and The Courier is at number 2, both still premium video on demand, followed by the rentals of Promising Young Woman and Nomadland, 2 Best Picture nominated films. Voyagers is at number 5, premium video on demand, followed by News of the World, people renting that. Chaos Walking, which we just said dropped out of the 2021 domestic top 10, is there at number 7. People can now buy it, so some people still choosing to watch that film. The Croods: A New Age at number 8, and then 2 rentals at number 9. Interstellar, which we see pop on and off this chart quite a bit, and then A Quiet Place at number 10. I guess people are getting ready for A Quiet Place Part 2, which opens in less than 2 weeks. I actually plan on revisiting the original film before I see the sequel, just because why not? It's a great movie. Let's look at what people are watching through iTunes on their various Apple devices. The Marksman is at number 1. Love and Monsters, which is a big 2020 title, is up for 99-cent rental. I'm one of those customers. I hadn't seen it yet. I saw it was just $1 to rent, so I also picked it up. It's there at number 2. North Hollywood and Together, 2 newer films with the buy rent window open at numbers 3 and 4. The Little Things at number 5. Promising Young Woman at 6. French Exit at number 7. Nobody, the PVOD, is at number 8. Pulp Fiction was available to buy for $5, and it comes in at number 9 this week. And Chaos Walking is at number 10 on the iTunes chart. And let's wrap up by looking at what people are watching on Amazon. First, looking at the streaming service as a whole here in the United States. The Woman in the Window, the very long-delayed Amy Adams film, is at number 1, followed by The Upshaws, a new Netflix series, at number 2. Jupiter's Legacy is at 3, with Love, Death, and Robots, a new season of that series, at number 4. The Mitchells vs. the Machines at number 5, followed by the Netflix series Halston, the Netflix movie I Am All Girls, the series Startup, Jungle Beat the movie at number 9, and then at number 10, still in the top 10, Coco Melon. God, the kids love that Coco Melon. And finally, let's look at what people are watching on Netflix movie-wise. At number 1 is The Woman in the Window. At 2, The Mitchells vs. the Machines. At 3, I Am All Girls. At 4, Jungle Beat the Movie. At number 5, Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted. At number 6, Dead Man Down. That's a carryover from last week. A Netflix original named Fairy is there at number 7, followed by Slight. The Strange House, another Netflix original, at 9, and The Whole Truth at number 10. And that wraps up this week's charts. A lot of business talk, but listen, this business talk has huge ramifications as we go down the line and see what gets greenlit, what doesn't get greenlit, what movies we see, what movies we don't see. I will be back later this week with the live show where you can submit your questions, so stay tuned for Thursday if you have any questions, or if there's more breaking news about this acquisition. There's always interesting stories that break around these kinds of things as the dust begins to settle. Also, don't forget to tune in to All My Movies on Wednesday. I will also be trying to get my review of Demon Slayer out this week. I've got a full dance card with a lot of different things going on, but I have my notes made and notes taken, and I'm excited to talk about season 1 and the movie for Demon Slayer, so stay tuned for that as well. We also have reviews coming up for A Quiet Place Part 2, for Cruella when all of those embargoes drop. I'll be taking a road trip to see one of those movies next week, so you may see charts next week either from a different location or maybe recorded at a different time. I may have to record it the day before next week. Just fair warning so that you know that. And as always, if you want to, you can check me out on Patreon at patreon.com/Dan Murrell. We just had our monthly AMA. We have a Schmodown study session coming up. We also have a monthly movie club, movie commentaries, all kinds of great stuff. If you want to see what we've got going on over on Patreon, please check me out, patreon.com/Dan Murrell. And thank you for watching me here. Please stay safe out there. I'll be back very soon with more breakdowns of all the latest box office news, reviews, you name it. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.